Welcome to NeoX, an adult role play and culture city in Second Life. Here, role play intertwines with music, art, creativity, connection, and nightlife as the rift carries voices and stories across time and worlds. I am Grace Ian, and this is Tales of NeoX. Edge Runners of Skyport Berry. Edge Runners live on the margins, half ghost, half dare. They claim the city spans not by deed or token, but by nerve. Where the rail sings under storm and steel hums with weight, that's where you'll find them, chalking their own names into the iron. They aren't a guild, not a house, not even a crew. They're the unclaimed, runners, thieves, messengers, climbers. They move fast, vanish faster, and treat silence like currency. Old colds still hold among them. Don't shout, don't point, don't snitch. The city hears what you spill. Edges belong to those who dare. If you fall, no one owes your ghost a name. Marks are promises. A line you draw is a line you stand by or die by. And some do fall. The port doesn't keep their names, only the stains where they slipped. Rain washes the steel, crews patch the anchors, and silence folds them away. Ghosts don't get funerals, they get forgotten. Still, every runner carries the memory, the flash of a coat vanishing in fog, the echo of boots that never land, the hush that spreads when the lift chains keep groaning, but one voice goes quiet. Most vanish into the storm, faceless and forgotten, but sometimes one is caught by a span, by a hand, by a house, and once seen in Skyport Berry, a ghost can never go unseen again. Leo's Rise, a Skyport Berry story. High above Neo-Extropia, Skyport Berry clings to the clouds on steel spans and anchors that never rest. Here, fortunes are gambled in Ravenwood's halls and lives are wagered on the edges of the rails. Leo's Rise follows one edge runner caught between chalk marks and house tokens, between the silence of steel and the voices that would claim him. Each line he draws binds him tighter to the city, to Tamsin Vale, and to Vivian Ravenwood herself. Once seen, a ghost can never go unseen. Rails and Near Falls, a Skyport Berry story. About Skyport Berry. High above the towers in Neo-Extropia, suspended in the clouds, lies Skyport Berry, the hub of the city's supply chain. Cargo lifts, steel spans, and suspended rails keep goods moving between the world below and the sky beyond. Fortunes are gambled in its halls, and laws are written by Vivian Ravenwood. Floodlights made the new railing span look like a stage no one had been dressed for yet. Wind came in off the port and lifted the caution tape into little flags. Tamsin Vale, the maintenance supervisor, walked the line with a torque wrench, counting anchors under her breath. Vivian watched from the catwalk, coat dry despite the weather, attention moving the way a level finds true. An edge runner cut across the deck, too quick, too light, one of the young unemployed who ran the edges for sport. His sneaker caught the edge where the safety rail ended and the air began. The deck flexed. One bolt on the corner plate turned a fraction and clicked. Tamsin moved before the scream, hand to harness, yanked back, both of them thumping hard onto the steel. The bolt rolled in a slow circle, bright as a coin. They lay there, breathing, the runner staring at the dark. Tamsin stared at the fastener. "That's not loose," she said, voice flat. "That's milled wrong." She dragged her thumb across the threads. Head stamps off. Threads are cut, not rolled. Lightweight counterfeit. It'll pass torque, then shear under load. Vivian stepped down to them. She picked up the bolt and ran a fingernail across the threads. "Sabotage," Tamsin said. Vivian weighed the bolt in her palm, feeling the counterfeit lightness. Bad stock dressed up as spec, meant to pass inspection and fail under feet. Her gaze cut to the fastener bins. "Tag this lot. We'll follow the invoice to whoever paid for a fall." Vivian held out a hand. The runner blinked. Name? Vivian said. Leo, he managed. You'll handle tools, not run edges, she said. Stay with Vale. Tamsin pushed to her feet, jaw set. We shut the span. We audit every anchor. We write it, Vivian said. Vivian walked to the central post where the crew tapes shift notes, grocery lists, and jokes. She pulled a marker from Tamsin's vest and spoke while she wrote on the rail, the words landing in a single line that sounded like a rail seating into place. From this hour, she said, and the crew nearby went quiet to hear it. No span in Skyport Berry opens to foot or freight until every anchor is double signed, one by a licensed hand, one by a citizen witness, and any tamper found, send it to the Ravenwood. She put the period in with a dot that bit the paint. Shut this span, quarantine this lot. Swap every fastener from it before we open. Tamsin read it once, then again. We'll lose time. We'll lose rumors, Vivian said. Time is cheaper. She turned the bolt in her fingers. Whoever milled this will try their sabotage again. They want failure to look like our carelessness. Tamsin glanced at the runner, at the edge, and then back to Vivian. What do you want from me? 3 things, Vivian said. First, you pick the witnesses. You teach Leo how to check anchors until he can do it in his sleep. Then, when people ask who wrote that line, she tapped the rail, tell them the house. Oh, then you tell them where to stand so they don't fall. Tamsin's mouth hid a brief, unwilling smile. Order, not mercy. Maintenance is order, Vivian said, returning a brief smile of her own. She handed the milled bolt to Tamsin. Hang that by the tool cage. Every shift touches it before they start. Let them feel what almost happened. The crew began to move again, slower, smarter. Tamsin clipped Leo to her belt and set about the audit, voice even, hands exact. Someone took a picture of the sentence on the rail and sent it down the line. By the next span, it was already a rule. Vivian stepped back to the catwalk. The wind had shifted. The flags lay down. She watched until the first 2 signatures went onto the first plate. When she left, the words were already shortening themselves the way useful law does. Double sign the anchors. Maintenance is order. Leo's Rise, Part 1. Lines that Hold. A Skyport Berry story. High above Neoxtropia, suspended in the clouds, Skyport Berry hangs on steel spans and anchors that never rest. Cargo lifts rise and fall day and night, feeding the markets below and the ships beyond. Fortunes are gambled in its halls, and laws are written by Vivian Ravenwood in iron and silence. Here the edges belong to those who dare to run them, until House Ravenwood sets its gaze. Rain had slicked the span into glass. Every footstep hummed in the iron, carried down into the bones of the port. I crouched over the anchor, chalk already in my hand, listening the way Tamsin taught me. Steel spoke if you stopped long enough to hear it. Nothing wrong here. Tight. Clean. I marked the line. Have it now. The white slash, my signature against the dark. One kind of mark meant the steel would hold. Another meant it needed reworking. Tonight, I'd given it the clean sign. Chalk was old, simple, and it held where sensors faltered. In Skyport Berry, a mark in chalk meant more than a ledger. It meant someone had listened and staked their name on what the steel had said. Don't waste chalk, Tamsin called from the next span over. Her voice came sharp through the rain. It isn't wasted, I shouted back. A pause. Then, so long as you stand by it. That was Tamsin. Every lesson a blade with 2 edges. I pushed up, wiped wet hair from my eyes, and caught movement from below. The cargo lifts weren't my concern, not tonight, but I knew the rhythm of the lifts. the hum of the carriers, the pulse of crews moving freight pods and sealed consignments. What I saw wasn't that. Figures working without noise, too careful, too quiet. Tarps thrown over gear that should have been logged. Sparks hissed under cloth where cutters chewed through something they weren't supposed to touch. Edge runner eyes learned to clock the wrong kind of silence, and this silence screamed. My mouth opened to call across the span, Tamsin, look! But the old code gripped my tongue. Runners don't shout, don't point, don't snitch. You keep it in your pocket until you decide what to do with it. That instinct ran deeper than the steel under my boots. Anchor clear, Tamsin's voice snapped me back. Clear, I lied. The words sat sour in my mouth. My chalk hand trembled against the span. The edge runner in me wanted to slip down, ghost the shadows, maybe lift something shiny and run. That would have been simple, safe. But the chalk mark on the beam glared back at me, my line, my word that this span held. I closed my fist. Going to check the east brace, I called, forcing the steadiness into my tone. Tamsin grunted acknowledgement, already bent over her own anchor. I turned and ran, not into the shadows, but back across the span, toward the Ravenwood. The rain made the rail slick, but I didn't fall. My legs knew these beams better than my heart knew what I had just decided. Leo's Rise, Part 2. The Eye of Ravenwood. Ravenwood, the house, always sounded different when you weren't supposed to be there. Dice were asleep, tables covered, lamps turned low so they glowed like banked coals. The floorboards ticked underfoot as they knew I didn't belong. Two floor captains marched me past the first floor, where the gambling tables slept, chips stacked in neat rows, discrete digital screens dimmed but never dark. Even at rest, it smelled of chance. The second floor was quieter, air thick with old liquor and the ghost of conversations that had changed fortunes. The lounge and VIP rooms held their secrets in velvet and glass, but I didn't pause. We climbed again. The third floor was different. No velvet, no dice. This was Vivian's domain. Not an office, but an overlook. Everything filtered up here. Nothing escaped notice. And she was there. Vivian Ravenwood did not rise. She didn't have to. Her gaze caught me the way iron catches a span bolt. Tight, exact. A data pad rested in her hand, stylus poised like it could sign me away. This one claims a span's been breached, a captain said. I forced the words out steady. Cargo lifts, East Sector, workers under without ledgers, arc cutters under tarp, their glow bleeding through the cloth. Her silence pressed, and in it memory uncoiled. The night I nearly went over the edge. Tamsin Vale's grip hauling me back onto the span, hard as chain. I'd lain on the ground, ribs aching, air gone, and then Vivian had stepped out of the shadows, her hand extended. Not to steady me, not to fuss, to pull me upright and in that same motion draw a line. You'll work for me now. I hadn't seen her since, until now. And you did not tell Vale? Her voice was precise, every syllable balanced. No, I admitted. You told me that night. Any tampering, send it to the Ravenwood. I remembered, so I brought it here. Her eyes stayed on mine. Not cruel, not kind, only measuring. Order is attention. You paid it. You'll keep paying it. Her stylus clicked once against the pad, sharp as a span line. A captain pressed a chip into my palm, an assignment, heavy as a chain. Vale will see you outfitted, Vivian said. Any tamper, any contractor found colluding in sabotage, bring it to the House Ravenwood. No delays, no noise, no waste. And with that, she dismissed me. I stepped out into the corridor, the chip burning in my hand. Outside, The rain had faded to mist, but the city still dripped, endless. I thought of Vale's grip saving my body and Vivian's hand pulling me to my feet. One had kept me alive, the other had claimed me, and now both were watching. Leo's Rise Part 3. The Span's Warning. The span groaned under weather and weight. Night crews had left it slick, rainwater pooling in seams that should have drained clean. I was alone this shift, Tamsin Vale somewhere deeper in the maze, trusting me to hear what the steel would say. I crouched, chalk ready. The anchor should have sung low and solid when I leaned on it. Instead, it rasped, dry as teeth ground together. Wrong. I scraped back the plate and saw it. The bolt wasn't worn, it was cut. Edges filed smooth to look like age. Fresh scoring glittered under the lamplight. Someone had prepped this span to fail, and soon. My stomach nodded. This wasn't mischief. This was a blade pressed to the city's throat. I pulled chalk from my belt, hand shaking as I slashed my mark, across the beam. Not the clean sign that said all good, but the cross cut that warned of danger. A span marked like this meant crews would come running, and if they didn't, the city might fall. A bright, firm warning. Chalk didn't lie, and it didn't glitch. In Skyport Barry, once a line was drawn, it was good as sworn. The shadows below shifted, movement. Too much, too close. Then a voice hissed up through the girders. That's him, Ravenwood's leash boy. I froze, knuckles white on the chalk. Figures slid out from under the lift platforms, faces half lit by rain lamps. Tools glinted in their hands, not wrenches, arc cutters. The old edge runner in me wanted to bolt, vanish into the storm, find another edge to claim. But Vale's voice pressed against my skull. So long as you stand by it. I stood. Spans logged, I called down, louder than I felt. My voice carried, clear as the chalk slash behind me. Any tamper goes straight to Ravenwood. A mutter rippled through the shadows. One spat on the steel, another lifted his arc cutter like a threat. But none of them climbed, not yet. I backed off the beam slow, rain slick under my boots, every step a dare. When I reached solid decking, I slammed the alarm rod 3 times. Iron answered iron, echoing down the port like a bell. Minutes later, Tamsin Vale appeared, storm coat flaring, eyes narrowing at the chalk line and the shadows slinking back into the dark. You held, said Vale. Not praise, not comfort, just fact. I nodded, heart still hammering. She studied the cut bolt, then me. Message will go up. Tamsin's voice thinned, the way it did when she spoke Vivian's words, not her own. Any tamper, any fat fracture, any whisper, send it to the Ravenwood. I looked out over the dripping city, chalk dust still on my fingers. I thought the edges were mine. Tonight I understood. I was theirs. Leo's Rise, Part 4. The Edge Holds. 3 nights later, they came for me. I wasn't running alleys or haunting taverns. I was where I belonged now, on the spans, chalk in hand, bent over iron. Rain sheeted down, slicking the steel, but the brace held true. I'd marked it clean, bold white against dark metal. The span would stand. I straightened, wiped rain from my face. That's when the hum shifted. Not steel this time, air. An arc cutter sparking live before I even saw the man holding it. He lunged from the fog, masks pulled low. Ravenwood's dog, he spat. The arc screamed as it kissed the rail inches from my face. Instinct took me sideways, boots sliding. My shoulder slammed iron hard enough to rattle teeth. I rolled, chalk snapping in my hand, and came up crouched. The arc whined again, closer this time. Heat seared the air. I twisted late, and the edge of the cutter grazed my cheek. It carved a burning line across skin, shallow but bright, a mark that would not fade easy. My face stung, wet with rain and blood. Another shadow loomed behind him, rope in hand. They wanted me down, not dead, at least not yet. Span won't hold forever, one jeered. Neither will you. The rope whipped. I ducked, heart hammering. The old edge runner in me would have vanished, turned the city into a maze, laughed at their fists scraping empty air. But the chalk line behind me glared like a wound. If I ran, Span might fall. If I failed, the city would fall. I slammed my mark across the brace bolt in white, claiming it even as the rope caught my arm. Pain lanced through me. I twisted, bit down on the cry, and jammed my boot into the attacker's knee. He folded with a curse. The arc whined again. Sparks skittered, then a voice cut sharper than any blade. Stand down! Tamsin Vale! Storm coats snapping in the wet wind, eyes lit like the storm itself. Two more of Ravenwood's crew flanked her, iron rods in hand. The saboteurs froze, weighing the math. Then, like rats, they scattered into the dark, rope trailing, cutter light vanishing into the mist. Vale strode to me, yanked the rope off my wrist. Blood slicked my sleeve. You marked it? I lifted my chalk-stained palm. I marked it. She studied the brace, then me. Her eyes flickered once to the wound on my cheek before settling back on the span. Rain drummed the silence between us. Without a word, she pulled a stubby tool from her coat, a span med sealer, no bigger than a grip torch, its tip pulsing steady orange. She caught my chin in her hand, turned my face to the rain, and pressed the heat close. The wound hissed as skin knitted under the cauterizing glow, pain flaring sharp before it dulled to a steady throb. The bleeding stopped. Only then did she nod. Span holds. So do you. Her voice shifted, cold as the house itself. Ravenwood said, any tamper, any fracture, any whisper, send them to her. You understand? I did too well. The edges had always been my freedom, the place no one owned. Tonight I learned the truth. They weren't free. They were held. And so was I. I pulled my coat tight against the storm, chalk still burning in my fist, and set my steps toward the Ravenwood. Leo's Rise, Part 5, The Crimson Confession. The crimson alcove was washed in red lamplight, smoke curling above laughter that didn't belong to me. I'd never paid for company before. Edge runners didn't do that. We ran the rails for the thrill, stole a kiss or a night where we found it, lived fast and vanished faster. But the chalk dust wouldn't leave my skin, and the sound of the cutter's scream lived in my ears. I needed someone's voice, anyone's voice that wasn't Vale's command or Ravenwood's decree. So I bought an hour. She led me through the curtains into a room padded with cushions and low light that softened every edge. Incense drifted in the air, heavy and warm. Her eyes were darker than the lamp's glow, her smile faint, almost secret. I'm Vera, she said. And you? Leo, chalk grit fell from my palms onto the rug. I don't need. You wouldn't be here if you didn't. Her voice was quiet, but it cut. Talk or stay quiet, both are allowed. I talked. I talked about the anchors, the bolts filed to fail, the saboteurs under the lifts, about Vivian's dismissal and Vale's storm coat cutting through the fog. Vera never interrupted. She watched the way I clenched my hands and waited. What is it you fear? She asked at last. That my chalk won't matter, that I'll mark a span and it'll fall anyway, and the city will fall with it. Her smile curved, not unkind, but edged. Or that it will hold? That you'll keep it standing? and you'll never be invisible again. Ghosts don't carry cities, men do. And once you're seen, boy, you're never unseen. Not here. The words hit harder than the cutter's scream. I stared at my hands. Chalk ground into the lines of my skin like it had always been there. Edge runners were supposed to vanish, laugh, fall, disappear into the storm, not carry weight, not carry anyone. But she was right. I felt it in my ribs, in the ache of my burned wrist, in the way Vale and Vivian's eyes both pressed on me from opposite sides. I wasn't a ghost anymore. I was seen. And once you're seen in Skyport Berry, you can never go unseen again. Vera rose, her movements unhurried, and led me back through the curtains. At the threshold, she paused, her smile softening just enough to take the sting from her words. Goodbye, Leo. Come back if the silence gets heavier than the spans. Leo's Rise, Part 6, Claim and Token. They brought the contractor at dawn, wrapped like a bad package. He smelled of oil and cheap brandy. His wrists were rope raw where the port had done its work. He walked like someone who'd been taught to be small. Tamsin Vale walked him in with two house captains, the rain still clinging to her storm coat. We didn't go through the front. There are doors meant for couriers, doors meant for cleaners, and doors meant for whatever Ravenwood uses that should never be named aloud. Tamsin took us through the last kind, a corridor that breathed dust and forgotten oaths. The contractor's eyes found me on the way in. There was calculation there, not bravery. The look of a man who'd bet on the port's indifference and lost. He spat on the floor out of habit more than defiance. It was the only thing he could still call his. Vivian received us in the overlook without standing. A data pad rested in her hand, the stylus poised like a blade of light. The room smelled of ozone and cold strategy. You returned with the problem, she said, her voice not bothering with gratitude. Tamsin handed the contractor to the captain at the door and stepped back. He's been cutting bolts at the east lift. Said he worked for a subcontracted line, paid in advance. Vivian tilted her head, curious as someone studying a tool. Paid in advance, she echoed. Strange economy. Her stylus moved once across the glowing margin of the pad and stopped. Then she locked the display without looking. You saw the cut bolt. You logged the span. You sounded the alarm. You held when men came for you. You could have run. I could have, I said. And you didn't. A small smile, sharp as a hook. Good. Men who don't run can be taught to hold. She slid open a drawer and drew out a square of dark metal no larger than a palm. Forged iron, edges beveled, weight undeniable. A raven in flight had been stamped deep into its face, wings folded to the line's edge. The metal gleamed dully in the low light, a mark of authority that would not burn, tear, or fade. A token, said Vale, her voice low, not given lightly. Vivian placed it in my hand. The weight bit into my palm. This will open doors and close them. It will pass you where a captain thinks his word is final. It will buy you silence where silence is for sale. It will mark you. The token's cold pressed against the chalk dust ground into my skin. Chalk was honest, public. This was different. This was ownership. Keep your chalk, Vivian added. Some truths are meant for everyone to see. Some are meant for no one but me. Outside, the port kept breathing. Inside, the overlook thickened with the quiet arithmetic of debts and claims. Your token stands, said Vale at last. And there was a strange weight in the words, as if she were admitting something she hadn't meant to protect. I understand, I said. Truth felt like iron in my mouth, heavy, unspittable. Vivian dismissed us with a soft tap of the stylus against the pad, the sound sharp as any gavel. I left with the token in my pocket, chalk on my fingers, and the knowledge that I was doubly marked by the line I drew and by the token that now bound me. On the span that night, I pressed the token flat against the steel and felt its weight echo through the beam. Then I added my chalk slash beside it, white against black. One mark for the city, one for the house, both mine to carry. But the steel carried more than rain. Sounds bled up from the service levels, sharp, wet thuds, bone on iron. A voice breaking into screams that cracked, then choked, then faltered. The rhythm was steady, practiced, a beating, not a fight. The contractor's voice. I gripped the chalk so hard it snapped in my fist. My mark on the span blurred in the mist as his cries dragged shorter, duller, until there was only the slap of fist finishing what had already been decided. Then silence, heavy, absolute. I had delivered him, walked him into Ravenwood's hands, thinking it was procedure, order. Chalk to steel, report to house. Now I understood what the house's ledger really balanced. Lives ground flat, erased as cleanly as chalk washed away in rain. For a breath, I wanted to scrape the warning mark off the beam, gouge it until my fingers bled, pretend none of it had been mine. But the token burned cold in my pocket, a reminder. It was mine. The raven stamped into the metal had claimed me as surely as it had condemned him. I pressed the token harder against the beam, forcing the tremor out of my hand, redrawing the line wider, sharper, cleaner. Steel doesn't care, steel just holds. The city below kept breathing, lights flickering across wet roofs, untroubled by one man beaten to silence. I told myself the span was safe tonight because of me, that the city still stood because of me, and I let that lie carry me through the storm. Leo's Rise, Part 7, The Test. The token was supposed to open doors. Instead, it drew stairs. The next night, Tamsin Vale handed me an assignment without ceremony. North spans, freight intake, 2 anchors, logs suspicious. I thought it would be routine, chalk and listen, nothing more. But she made sure the token sat heavy in my pocket before I left. Show it if they press, she said, voice clipped. Then she turned away. The freight intake was no one's quiet corner. Smoke from the oil cranes hung in the air, chains shrieked under strain, and crews barked orders through the din. I moved along the rails, listening for the hum of steel, when the first captain blocked my path. He was thick-set, shoulders straining his harness, eyes narrowing at the chalk in my hand. "Rail rats don't log anchors here," he said. "This sector's mine." "I'm logging it," I replied, steady as I could manage. Another man stepped up beside him, then a third. Their silence pressed harder than their boots. The old me would have ducked, ghosted down a side span, left the dispute to the captains. But my palm itched with the weight in my pocket. Slowly I drew it out, the square of dark metal raven stamped deep. A hush rippled down the beam. Even the chains seemed to pause. The first captain's jaw tightened, then his eyes shifted. Not fear, not respect, calculation. "House token," he muttered. His crew leaned closer. "You'll stand aside," I said, holding it where the lamplight caught the raven's wings. The captain's mouth twisted. "Doesn't make you Ravenwood, just makes you bleed for her." He drew a knife, tapping it against the span. My heart hammered, but I stepped forward instead of back. Pressing the token flat to the steel, I slashed a chalk line beside it, white and bold. This anchor's logged. My mark stands. Anyone who doubts it, I fixed him in the eye. Stand on it when it fails. You ready to bet the city on your pride? The knife hovered. His crew shifted uneasily. Then he spat, dark against the steel, and sheathed the blade. Span's yours, he said. Not respect, not surrender, just warning. The kind that follows you. They pulled back, boots clanging off into the roar of the intake. I stayed, crouched, chalk still in my hand, the token pressed cold to the rail. The line held, and so did I. Later, Tansem Vale sat with the storm coat still on her shoulders, boots unstrapped but not removed. The lamp on her desk burned low, throwing more shadow than light. The word had already found her. Leo on the freight intake, token bared, standing down a captain. She could see it plain, his jaw tight, hand too rigid on the chalk. Braver than sense, exactly how she looked once, shoved into the open with Vivian watching from somewhere unseen. She remembered the weight of that first night, how the fear never showed on her face, but lived in her bones for weeks. Her hands rested on the med sealer on the table. She tapped it once, twice, the rhythm steadying her thoughts. Does it make you Ravenwood? She murmured, echoing the captain's sneer. Her jaw shifted, the scar near her mouth tugging with something close to a smile. Not yet. The smile lingered longer than she intended. Not indulgence, not softness, just recognition of what it meant to hold when everything in you wanted to flee. She doused the lamp and leaned back, coat still on, boots half off. Sleep would come light, if at all, but in the dark she allowed one small truth. The boy had held, and that mattered. Tamsin Vale. The Spans made and unmade people by the hour. Tamsin Vale learned that young. Her father was a cargo handler who broke his back on the chains. Her mother a ledger clerk who vanished in a union purge that no one spoke of after. Vale was left with the edges of both worlds, strength enough to pull steel, sense enough to count the weight of every move. She ran the Spans early, a rail rat like 100 others, chalking lines for captains who never remembered her name, until the day a span gave way, 3 men dead, 1 crushed silent, 2 screaming until they weren't. Vale had been the one to mark that anchor, and the mark had been true. She knew it. But no one listened to a rat barely grown, chalk still under her nails. When Vivian Ravenwood claimed the house, she called the crews to order with a voice that didn't bend. Where others saw a slip of a span rat in Vale, Vivian saw something else. The refusal to bow when accused, the bite in her words when cornered. The house made her maintenance supervisor before the bruises from the crew's fists had faded. Not because she was the best, not yet, but because she had stood when the city tried to break her. That was the currency Vivian valued. The past year ground her sharper. She learned how to read steel like language, how to bend a crew without breaking them, how to hold her face still when she wanted to spit. To the Spans, she became flint, hard, sparking when struck. To Vivian, she became stone, cut to edge. Now, a couple of years older than Leo, she watched him take the first steps she'd once taken. She didn't soften, not outwardly, but the memory lived close, and it bent her in ways she would never admit. She knew what it was to stand under Vivian's gaze, chalk in hand, and learn that holding wasn't a skill, it was a choice. You've been listening to Tales of NeoX, stories from the rift in the living city beyond. More voices and chronicles will follow, each revealing another side of this strange and beautiful place. NeoXtropia, role play, music, art, and nightlife in one living city.